everyone. This is Robert Asencio once again. Today, we want to discuss why has Governor DeSantis call for a special session. We know the 60-day session in the 2022 calendar year just completed beginning week of March. But then the governor called for a special session. We know many of the Floridians' priorities have gone unmet. Today, to discuss this, I brought a member of the Florida House of Representatives, State Representative Joseph Geller, also known as commonly as Joe Geller, a incredible legal mind, an attorney, private attorney by practice, a person who I hold in high regard and can always give us a good understanding of what's going on with a little sense of humor. Welcome, Joe. Representative, good morning. How are you?
How you doing, Robert, my good friend? Nice to be with you.
Man, so thank you. You guys went through a 60-day session. It was one of the most contentious sessions I've witnessed in many years. What did you think of the session? And now this calls for special session.
Well, you know, from having been up there yourself, Robert, which was certainly a great pleasure having you there. It's usually grim, but this was worse. This was the worst I've seen. They didn't finish on time. We had a carryover from Friday till Monday. They just couldn't seem to get it done. And now we have to come back for this ridiculous special session. I'm not happy with it. Frankly, I didn't like the maps. As I know, you know, I was the ranking Democrat on the redistricting committee. We didn't like the state maps. We didn't like the congressional maps. We didn't like the one the House developed. We didn't like the one the Senate developed. But then right at the end, after the governor intervened in the process, which is unprecedented, they came up with the most ridiculous idea of all. They decided, well, we're going to adopt a map to try to make the governor happy, but we're not confident that it's constitutional. So we're going to have a backup map, one from column A, one from column B. And if the courts don't like map A, then maybe they'll like map B. What a ridiculous idea. I mean, these are the same legislators who voted to outlaw ranked choice voting, but they seem to be engaging in ranked choice redistricting. Just a terrible idea, bad maps. And even with all that, still the governor vetoed it after they tried to give him what he said he wanted.
So the governor's called this essentially, there's been a call for a special session. It's another week, starting the week after next. What is it, the 15th, the week of the 15th.
We don't actually.
Oh, the 19th. This is the 19th.
Tuesday the 19th.
Okay, so it's the week of the 19th, and it is to address the maps, the congressional maps that
as far
he is favoring,
as
right?
That's the only thing that's been included in the call. All the important things they didn't get done. You know, Surfside.
Condo safety.
It's in my district, and it was an awful thing. I introduced some bills. There was a compromise committee bill. We had some real momentum apparently on both sides, and yet they couldn't agree. It's one of those.
What was the bill that you introduced, Rep? What was the bill that you introduced in the wake of Surfside?
We had several things included: more inspections, more frequent inspections, obligations to report the results of those inspections to local government, recertifications, and requiring the residents of these condominiums to try to, step up when necessary and do the repairs and maintenance in a timely fashion and increase reserves to be able to do that. So a whole bunch of different things covered. It's one of those Tallahassee mysteries. When the House is very enthusiastic and says we're all for a bill, and the Senate is very enthusiastic and says we're all for a bill, and then somehow you end up without a bill.
So was your bill? Did your bill go to committees? Was it on the floor? Just for the reference of the viewers.
Look, a lot of stuff in my bill was picked up in what became the House bill that was run by Rep. Perez. So, I consulted with him. We talked. I was supportive of the overall product. Doesn't have to be the way that I introduced it. I'm never concerned about who gets credit. I just want to see something get done. My disappointment was that we didn't get anything done. But yet that's not included in the call. Neither is the terrible problem people are facing with property insurance.
Yeah.
Neither are, they still haven't addressed the gaming issue after our compact got struck down. We're in limbo on that. But yet all they want to do is play politics and try and steal a couple of more congressional seats and just not be representative of the people of Florida. It's a
So
terrible session, bad bills, and now a terrible special.
So I had JC Planas come on some weeks back, and he pointed out the fact that in the modern history of the governorship, there has not been a single governor in the state of Florida who has introduced their own district congressional drawn maps. DeSantis is the first. Can you talk a little bit about those bills and what they represent?
Yes.
I'm sorry, the map.
That's a true statement. But, the underlying maps themselves are worse than the interference. What he's trying to do, basically, is to deprive minority voters of their right to elect their own representatives. He's trying to eliminate what's supposed to be a protected black district across the northern tier of Florida from Gadsden County, just near Tallahassee.
Is that Representative Lawson's district?
Al Lawson.
Okay.
Now, it's not about incumbents, because the other district they're going after, that's an African-American district, is in the Orlando area. It's currently represented by Val Demings. She's running for the Senate. So it's not about incumbents. It's about the citizens. It's about the voters in those communities. The Florida Constitution, the Fair District Amendments, say you have to protect minority access and the right to elect representatives of their own choice. So does the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, a landmark bill. Now, parts of that were struck down by the Supreme Court in the Shelby County case a few years ago. But there's still an important part, Section 2, that says you have to preserve the ability, especially of minority communities, language communities, to be able to elect representatives of their own choice. It appears the governor said, no, you can't have that. He thinks that's unconstitutional. He thinks, basically, he says anyway, that the 14th Amendment outlaws things like the Voting Rights Act that says we have to preserve minority rights to elect representation. He said, well, you can't have this gerrymandered district all the way from Tallahassee to Jacksonville. The House actually came back in one of their multiple plans and said, well, we'll have a district that doesn't really do as good a job. It's 10 points worse, but we'll fit it all in right into Duval County, into Jacksonville. And that way it's not gerrymandered, but it might protect minority access. And still, the governor vetoed that. If he meant what he said, that his issue was the gerrymandering, they gave him something that met, I don't think it was a legal map, but they gave in and gave him what he said he wanted, and still he vetoed it because he said, no, that's not good enough.
So if he's not addressing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's behind this? I think, I don't know it, I can't look into the man's mind, but from what he said, he's looking to be able to launch a legal challenge to the Florida Constitution and, in fact, to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the landmark legislation that Dr. King helped fight for. And he'd like to...
Joe, you froze up here. Until Joe comes back live, you're hearing from State Representative Joseph Geller, also an attorney in private law practice.
Is to set up, I think what he's trying to do here is to set up a legal challenge to overturn the Voting Rights Act itself and say you can't even protect minority voting rights and the rights of minority citizens. And that's where he's looking, I think, to get. And it's not just about the maps. It's about sending a dog whistle to all the people that are hostile to minorities in this country and show them that he's their champion.
So I understand from the maps that he introduced, the governor has introduced, that yes, it restricts some of the Afro-American communities districts, right? Congressional districts, but it also restricts some of the Latino, Hispanic districts as well. So you have less Afro-American, less Latino districts who are becoming the minority majority. Is he doing this for his supposed run, what is assumed his national run for president?
You know, I try not to talk about what's inside people's heads because it's hard to know. He's certainly running for re-election. He's got a very spirited challenge from the Democratic Party for his own re-election campaign. And yes, I think that this has more to do with politics than I think it has to do with, constitutional law, because to overturn something that's been the law of the land for, 60 years almost, to overturn something that's been an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War. It was intended to be remedial. It was intended to say, we're going to protect people who need, it's called equal protection. And when you use it as a sword instead of as a shield to take away minority rights, I think that really perverts the meaning of the words equal protection.
Certainly a scary time. So have you had conversations with fellow caucus members, for fellow members of the legislature now going into special session? Are you guys going to try to introduce some of the bills that would address the priorities that people are feeling right now? We know that, like you just mentioned, the rent, the insurance prices, property, increase of property values, jobs, unemployment. Are any of those issues going to be introduced by members of the House?
Sadly, not one. As it stands, this session is about nothing more than maps and redistricting. And we're not allowed under the rules to introduce anything that's not in the call. Now, there is some chance that the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate will reach an agreement to expand the call, but it won't be by much. If they, at least condo safety, but that's not happening. They've said that's not happening. Maybe if they can reach a deal among them, they'll come up with something for the soaring property insurance rates. But they're not addressing rental housing and the cost of rents. They're not even talking about affordable housing because they gave some money, but they just, the year before they said, we're not going to take any more money out of the Affordable Housing Fund. And then this year again, they did it. They did it just when they had promised not to. So that's not on the table. They're not going to bring that up. They're not going to talk about fixing that so-called Don't Say Gay bill. They're not going to talk about anything to help preserve a woman's right to choose after the ridiculous, awful abortion bill that they passed. They're not going to even do anything to fix this problem where people are demanding that books be removed from school libraries because somebody has an ideological objection to them. It's practically book burning. It's book banning. And they're not going to address a single one of those bad bills. They're not going to address this year's election bill, which is terrible. Last year's just got struck down by a federal judge who said the court will not be blind to the fact that repeated passage of legislation designed to take away rights from minority voters has to be intentional. If it happens again and again, it must be intentional in trying to deprive people of voting rights. None of that is going to be on the table. Just they're playing politics. And honestly, Robert, as you know from your service up there yourself, The Republican majority does not take the minority caucus much into account. There's a ray of hope there, and the ray of hope is this: it's not going to happen in this special session, but what can happen, since we have new districts, we need people to get out there and run. We need good people like you to get out there and run, and we need to try to change how strong those majorities are in the House and Senate. But number one, we need a new governor. And if we had a new governor, if the people listening in who don't like somebody who was, yelling at children, who don't like the attack on the biggest employer in the state, if the people who are listening in helped get us a new governor, the politics in Tallahassee would change radically, even with Republican majorities in the House and Senate, hopefully diminished. But if you have a governor, you got, like they say, a new sheriff in town, and it'll all be very different.
So let's talk about the governor's race. So on the Democrat side, we got 4 or 5 minutes left. On the governor's side, you have 3 top-tier candidates, 6 so far that have filed. Democrats, on the Democrat, they have some independents. But the top-tier, 3-tier candidates on the Democrat side are Charlie Crist leading at the top of the polling, followed by Nikki Fried, Agriculture Commissioner, and then followed by State Senator Annette Taddeo. How do you see their races unfolding? And what would you tell? What are your words for the people who are going to vote in this primary, the Democrat primary, who are Democrats? What would you tell them to be on the lookout for, and what's at stake for them?
Look, we have 3 wonderful candidates. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know all 3 very well. I know all 3 personally. And I really think all 3 are exceptional public servants. Annette is a personal friend. We've spent a lot of time together, been to her house. Nikki has done a fantastic job. I was very enthusiastic supporter. I've known Charlie for many, many years. So I say, with all deference to all 3, they're all great. I happen to be a Charlie Crist supporter. I've known him for many years. In fact, my brother, a few years younger than me, was at FSU just after I was. And he was an undergraduate when I was in law school. And he met Charlie Crist back then, and they were involved in student government together. So my family's known Charlie for many years. He's a fine man. He really is a great choice. I think he brings some real strengths if he's our nominee, not just the ability to raise a lot of money. He did raise over $1 million just last month, not counting the obscene money from billionaires that the current governor is raising. That used to be considered real money in politics. Charlie's raised over $8 million. That's important. But I think messaging is important too. And I'm a big believer that Charlie's uplifting message, that we need to, stop all of this anger and blame and demonizing people. He has such a positive, uplifting message. I mean, the guy wears a golden rule, do unto others bracelet every day. I think there's an appetite for that. I think people are tired of the anger. And the fact that Charlie is so well known, I think gives him, let me say this, the way they tried to demonize President Biden, but failed because everybody knew him, I think Charlie has the same ability. People know who he is, and the Republican spin machine will not be able to demonize Charlie Crist. People know him, and they won't buy it.
And the fact is that while he was governor, we really did not have a bad cycle of when he was governor, right? His term was relatively scandalous free. It was pretty much about the people. There was progressive growth in the state of Florida. So there's something to be looked at right there.
He even made Republican enemies back when he was one, because he helped get people who had been convicted of felonies back integrated into society and back get their right to vote back. Something we're still struggling. When he was there, he did that, and people remember.
Let me ask you one last question, because depending on who you ask. If you ask the Republicans, they'll tell you the economy is doing exceptionally well in the state of Florida. You ask the Democrats, they'll say something different. How do you think our economy is faring, especially since we have now $100 billion budget? How do you think that's going to favor the problems, the economic hardship that people are seeing and experiencing on a day-to-day basis?
You know, the governor and other Republicans are running around claiming credit for federal dollars that have come into this state that they were against. They were against it. They made speeches against it. Congress members voted against it. But Joe Biden made sure that there was real money on the table to help come out of the pandemic. The American Relief Program was huge. And then this infrastructure bill that they talked about for years, Joe Biden got it done. So we're going to see investments in roads and bridges and, broadband. So I think the economy is on the upswing. But, the Republicans took this money, all these Biden bucks, we like to call it, and they make speeches against it, but they're still claiming credit. I do think the economy is improving, not just in Florida. I think it's improving nationwide, but it's because of policies that the administration, the Biden administration, and the Democrats in Congress have followed, frequently without Republican votes. And as a result, I think we're trying to address some of these things. That's why that budget was a record budget, because we had a lot of federal dollars. And still, with all that money, they wouldn't expand Medicaid for needy people in this state. They wouldn't encourage people to get jobs by not losing their health insurance. And just this still taking money away from affordable housing so rents would come down. It's just a shame. Charlie Crist called for a cut to the gas tax. And what does the Republicans do? They say, well, we're only going to cut it in October, right before the election. Terrible. But I think things are getting better, but it's not, the people claiming credit in this state aren't the people who deserve the credit.
On that note, Representative Geller, if the audience wanted to get a hold of you, where can they call you, or where can they send information to you?
They could certainly email me at joseph.geller@myflorida. What is the last thing? myfloridahouse.gov. I don't myself that often, but or they can call my legislative office, or I'm going to tell my cell phone right now. It's 305-409-4431. And if I'm not, on the phone or in the middle of something, I take calls. I don't, only take calls from numbers I know who they are. I'll take it from anybody trying to get me. If I've got a minute free, I'm happy to talk to people. Or they could contact you, Robert, and you pass it along to me, and I'll make sure I get back to them. Always happy to hear from people. I am term limited. This is my last term in November. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve the people of this state. And although I don't plan to run for anything, at least as it stands this fall, I'm certainly not going to fade into the woodwork. I intend to continue as I did before, doing anything I can to help make this a better state. And I look forward to working with you on that, my old friend.
Oh, I hope so. On all transparency, Joe Geller was appointed to be my mentor in the Florida House. I can't think of a more honorable person to have been mentored by. It was a great pleasure to serve with you. It is a great pleasure to continue to work with you. Guys in the audience, listen, this may sound partisan, but the issues that are affecting every one of us, I think we can agree on them, that they're not bipartisan. I'm sorry, they are bipartisan. They affect us equally. It doesn't discriminate. The issue doesn't discriminate on whether we're Republican or Democrat. Likewise, the decisions that are being made by the current administration are impacting and long lasting, and they're singularly agenda driven. We see it. Let actions speak louder than words. Take a look at it. Take a look at your personal lives. See if you're doing better today than you were before. But the point is, we need a balance in power. So I would encourage you to re-listen to this broadcast. Listen to what the Representative Geller said about balance of power and how much better we'd be off if we had another administration. On that note, I can't thank you enough, Representative Geller, Millers, Miami's community news team, Andres, Ilian in the background doing the production. We look forward to seeing you and speaking with you in the next time. Joe, please don't hang up. This will end our show right now, but we look forward to the next one. Thank you.
My best regards to Grant and Mike Miller, too. Thanks, Robert.
You're welcome, sir.